Hi, it's Joe Morgan with the Tech Leader Spotlight podcast, where we interview tech leaders to learn about their journey and leadership lessons learned along the way. This show is brought to you by the No Regret Money Plan, created for smart tech professionals who know they're doing well, but aren't certain if it's enough. We help you invest cash wisely, make the most of stock awards, minimize your tax bill, and create clarity and confidence so you can spend less time worrying and more time living the life you want. If you'd like more information on that, look me up on LinkedIn. That's Joe Morgan at Best Financial Life. Today on our podcast, we have Michael Stalcup, who is an engineer at Amazon. And Michael is an experienced leader who specializes in deployment infrastructure. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Hey, happy to be here.
Great. So deployment infrastructure. So you were telling me a little bit about that before we started recording, but tell me what that is.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a general developer, but one thing I've focused on at Amazon is this deployment infrastructure, which it's basically the mechanisms for how code moves around between different machines. So if a developer is writing code at Amazon, they need to deploy that code onto a server somewhere to make it useful or to like power the Amazon website. The code has to go somewhere. So there's a whole process that developers everywhere have to do where they test code along the way and make sure the code is written a certain way and packaged and deployed to a server. So there are different ways of like streamlining this and optimizing it so that the code is up to date and tested well.
Interesting. Is that different? Is that something I'm sure it's somewhat unique in terms of how Amazon does it, but is that different than what other firms do? Or
Amazon and other big tech, I think, have really well-defined mechanisms for this. Um, but smaller companies maybe don't. Maybe somebody just copies some files and then puts them onto a server, and then there's no testing. There's things that can go wrong with that, but it's very fast. But these like bigger companies that have more at stake are going to build mechanisms to make it so that some single dev can't break the important business website.
yeah, that gets more and more important the bigger, more complex things get, I
Mhm.
imagine. Well, we're here to talk about leadership in the tech space. So tell me, what does leadership in the tech space mean to you?
Yeah, I'm interested to see where you want to go with that question because when I think of that question, it's a very broad question. I think there's like different levels of leadership. There's like a really high macro level where that's, people, influential people, organizations are like setting the whole industry direction, like, Google or OpenAI or something. That's one way I think of leadership is those really
Hmm.
big tech companies that are changing the whole industry. Another kind of leadership is more of like an individual career level where, it's like the day-to-day of how do you interact with people on your team or your organization? How do you like get people to collaborate and share knowledge and like improve yourself in your career? So that's what I think of leadership is like these at least two different ways. So I was gonna see what you thought about that, or if you want to explore one of those.
Yeah, sure. So what we've mostly talked about is the individual uh, career level, but not really career, just like individual, like how you lead a team maybe, or how you help people grow, those sorts of things. The higher macro level, influential, where the industry is heading. Um, I believe there's plenty of people out there talking about that stuff. My concern, is more the individual tech workers, because that's where I spend my time. And I know there's a lot
Mm.
of challenges out there. And so I like to, one of the reasons I launched this podcast is to help to try to get some tips and some help for folks out there who not necessarily are struggling, but so that they won't struggle and can learn from each other. Because you tech workers like to be very collaborative, and we see that across company and inside companies. And so this is just another way to do that. So thinking about the individual career level of leadership. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I think it's important to like if you're trying to advance your career, you should think about actively like presenting yourself as a leader or like putting yourself in the shoes of a leader. You want to be thinking like collaboratively. You want to be like demonstrating your value in things. Actually, these maybe we can get into later, but I think like you want to present yourself in a way that you're not just following orders, you're like thinking ahead. You're trying to make systems better, you're trying to help people. It's things that are those are things that are good like both for you and for whoever you're working for.
Yeah, and so you have to be in an environment where that's accepted, right? Where if you speak up about things that, that's accepted. Do you
Mhm.
find, I'm not speaking about Amazon in particular, because I don't want to dive into any one company, but just generally in the industry, do you find that open collaboration does exist?
Mm. In my experience, yes, like I've always worked, maybe I'm lucky, but I've always worked in companies where the developers are very open-minded to like working with each other. You know, maybe occasionally you'll find some developers who are really stubborn and they want to do things their way. But generally I've found that if you're able to make a case for something, like if we do this, it's better for these reasons, there's always somebody that's going to listen to you and be open to trying or yeah, it's kind of on you, I think, to make that point. But people I've worked with are always open to listening.
Hmm. When you think about doing that, like uh, making your case, or stepping up and communicating in that way, do you feel like um, all the tools needed for that, that those are available, or do you feel like there's something missing in terms of uh, not being able to, but being, well, I guess being able to make yourself heard in the way that you want to?
Mm, yeah, it may depend on the company, like what way you could communicate that. Amazon is pretty good about having mechanisms where you can communicate these things. Like there's there's like document templates where you can try to outline why something would be valuable to do, and then mechanisms for like who you can send that to, like your manager or other managers, your peers. Other companies, maybe it's less well defined. Um,
Hmm.
I think it's the developer's responsibility to find how to communicate that. If like a developer's finding that maybe there's a piece of tech that the company is not using at all, and you realize that there's a clear benefit to using it, and you want to explain like why it would be good to do and how we would implement it, how much time it would save, things like this. Like it's kind of I think it's up to the developer a bit to like get those measurements and then present them to somebody who can make a decision to like prioritize this.
Yeah. And so stepping forward in that leadership role, I think for many of us does not really come naturally. Especially, doing it in a way that is that's going to be received well, right? Because everybody's different and we all think differently. And so I'm wondering, is there training for that particular, like training on how to communicate? Like, do you see that in the industry?
Mm, I haven't participated in this kind of training. I know it exists. Like
Hmm.
there are ways to practice speaking effectively and probably all kinds of ways to like improve your communication skills and things like this. Um, yeah, I can't speak to everyone, but the angle that I choose to use is like find something that I care about or that I'm interested in, which oftentimes is like how to improve some system or process or like how to adopt some new piece of technology that I find interesting. And then to me, it's like it's more natural if you have that interest and you want to communicate it, then it's just a matter of like kind of putting the numbers together of like how can I measure what the impact of this would be? How can I communicate about it? Like if you're interested in it, I think all of it becomes easier also.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. Well, speaking of which, there is a lot of turmoil in the industry right now, a lot of layoffs, actually a lot of job openings too, but there's a lot of good people on the sidelines. And there's a lot of people working today who aren't sure if they're going to be working in the coming months because they're not sure if the wave of layoffs has ended. So for those people who are currently working, what piece of advice can you give them that they can do while they're still working to help future-proof themselves?
Mm, yeah, it's kind of similar to what I just said, where like if you're trying to advocate for something to kind of show leadership, it's a similar process to your career. I think you always want to be like working on yourself. You want to always want to be working on something that is building skills for yourself, and you always want to be finding your strengths, communicating, networking, collaborating. This is kind of similar to what we were talking about of like showing leadership. But if you're doing these things, I think if you're like proactive at learning new things and communicating them, showing what value you've brought, these should become habits. Like when you're measuring what would be the impact of some potential new thing, that's good. But then you also want to measure what was the impact of something that I did and make notes for yourself so that, um, if you're going to try to go for a promotion or if you're going to try to discuss like a yearly recap of what you did, you should have some notes that's like, here's some things I did that were good and why they're important. You always be taking these notes and always learning new things. And yes, so like if you had to lose your job today, you don't want to feel like you didn't get anything out of that job. You want to feel like, oh, well, I at least learned a lot of useful skills or I met these people. Um, so I guess that's my answer is like you want to be meeting people, learning new skills, and learning how to show that value like through documenting things.
Yeah, and you need to understand that yourself before you can really use that, in your future job search. Good advice. If you could go back in time just 5 years and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
Um, I think similar on a similar note, I think like if you're choosing a role, you should be very careful of like what the team you're joining is and who the manager is. I've found that it's very important to get along, like you want to get along with the manager well. You want to like have someone that's really got your back and who like you're really on the same page with. It just helps things like it helps everything go smoother, like your career growth and like what kind of impact you can make. I also think it's important to know really well what your team is working on that you're going to join. It helps a lot if you're interested in what you're working on. So if you can choose to be on a team that's working on a product that you really believe in, or something that, maybe it's something that you found very interesting, um, those things help you a lot to like align. If you align your interests with what you're working on, it's going to help you like stand out and be interested and motivated to help. Um, yeah, like if you don't have those things, you can kind of get stuck into some like slower paths that we were trying to avoid, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's such great advice. I often heard that people don't quit the company they work for, they quit the manager they work for. Like that's why people quit their jobs is because of the relationship they have with their manager, which
Mm,
uh,
mhm.
I think we see that quite a bit. Well, thanks so much, Michael, for joining us on the Tech Leader Spotlight podcast. I appreciate everything that you've shared and your thoughtfulness that you brought to this conversation.
Sure, yeah. I hope that was helpful to somebody. Thank you.
I'm sure it was. So just as a reminder, this is sponsored by the No Regret Money Plan, where tech leaders gain clarity and control of their finances so they can live out the rest of their life with intention. If you want to know more about that, look me up on LinkedIn, Joe Morgan, Best Financial Life. Thanks again, Michael.